It was Caleb's 7th birthday, and the small suburban house in Asheville, North Carolina, was bursting at the seams. Kids dashed wildly through the halls, squealing with sugar-fueled excitement. Wrapping paper littered the floor like confetti. The scent of chocolate cake mixed with barbecue smoke drifted through the air. In the heart of it all stood little Caleb, beaming in a homemade superhero costume stitched together with love and last-minute fabric scraps. His father, Mason, knelt beside him, encouraging his every imaginary victory, while his mother, Evelyn, balanced cupcakes and conversation like a seasoned host. But not everyone was laughing. At the back of the house, in a cramped, overheated kitchen, Sophia stirred, chopped, sautéed, and checked the oven like a chef on the verge of collapse. Her hands moved in rhythm, silent, practiced. No one offered help, no one knocked. The kitchen door stayed closed, sealing her away from the party like a ghost in her own home. Evelyn occasionally shouted requests through the door. "Can you make that sweet corn casserole, Mom?" Caleb loves it, but they were more commands than questions. Sophia wiped sweat from her brow and smiled faintly. But it wasn't real. It was the kind of smile you wear when you've forgotten what joy feels like. 3 hours later, the kitchen resembled a battlefield. Grease stains on the floor, steam fogging the windows, pots stacked like collapsed towers, and Sophia's hands trembling from the ache of nonstop labor. Her back refused to straighten. Her knees screamed from standing too long, but she took a breath, smoothed down her apron, and prepared to step out with the final dish. Today wasn't just Caleb's birthday. Sophia had a secret, one that sparkled in her pocket like a hidden gem. That morning, on a whim, she'd bought a scratch-off ticket from the gas station down the street. "Just for fun," she told herself. "Maybe I'll win $5. But when she scratched it next to the simmering stew, her breath caught in her throat. $10,000. She stared at it for minutes, then checked the lottery site. Twice. Real. Verified. $10,000 from a $2 ticket. For the first time in years, the universe had whispered directly to her, "You don't have to keep living like this." She had planned to tell everyone over dinner, maybe surprise them, maybe buy Caleb a better bike, help Evelyn with groceries, maybe even put a little aside for herself, for once. But then Caleb stormed into the kitchen. His cape fluttered behind him, his brow furrowed like a storm cloud. "You forgot the cake," he snapped, voice sharp, entitled. "I don't want your stupid food anymore." Before Sophia could react, he grabbed a cup of cherry soda from the counter and threw it. The splash hit her square in the chest, cold, sticky, humiliating. She gasped, stumbling back into a cabinet. The cup shattered at her feet, and before she could even process what had happened, Mason's voice bellowed from the living room, full of annoyance but zero concern. "Come on, Sophia, he's just a kid. Don't make a scene." Her arms dripped red soda. Her chest ached from the sudden impact. And nobody came. Nobody even looked. Sophia stood frozen. The world didn't stop. It kept moving without her. Laughter continued. Screens flickered. Plates clinked. It was as if she had become invisible. And that's when something inside her, something deep and essential, snapped. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. A flicker. A thread unraveling after years of being tugged. She walked to the sink, rinsed off her hands, then picked up the last dish, a slow-cooked beef roast, and walked out with a steady expression, her voice locked behind clenched teeth. She didn't tell them about the lottery. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. Because in that moment, she realized she was not part of this family. She was staff, background, expected to cook, clean, serve, without complaint, without presence, without thanks. And something inside her whispered, louder than any birthday song or childish tantrum, "You do not have to live like this anymore." As Sophia stepped out into the dining room with the roast in hand, her gaze landed on something, or rather someone, she hadn't seen in over 4 decades. Sitting beside her husband Henry was a woman dressed in a pale blue blouse, her blonde hair pinned neatly, lips painted a soft mauve, and a polished smile that screamed confidence. She looked like she'd stepped out of a retirement lifestyle magazine. The woman turned her head and offered a smooth, practiced smile. "Hi, Sophia," she said, like they'd just run into each other at the grocery store. It took a moment, but then Sophia's stomach dropped. It was Veronica Sterling, the girl Henry had been obsessed with in college, the one he wrote poems about, drew sketches of, even named a password after once. She'd moved away, married some lawyer out west. Sophia remembered seeing her husband's obituary a few months ago on Facebook. Now here she was, sitting in Sophia's home, beside Sophia's husband, like she belonged. Before Sophia could even greet her, Henry cut in with a sharp, irritated tone. "What took you so long in there? People are starving." It wasn't a question. It was a command, a reprimand. He didn't notice the soda stain on her shirt, didn't care. He turned back to Veronica with a soft chuckle and carefully placed a piece of roast on her plate. "Try this, Veronica. She may not be good at much, but she knows her way around a kitchen." Sophia didn't speak. She couldn't. She set the roast down and sat at the far end of the table, numb and dazed. Then Caleb stood up on his chair and shouted, "Grandma was eating everything in the kitchen. That's why I'm starving." Everyone laughed. Sophia blinked. She hadn't eaten a single bite all day. Her hands still shook from exhaustion. The pudding, the pie, the roast, all made from scratch. And yet here was her grandson, lying to earn their laughter. "I wasn't eating anything, sweetheart," she said gently. "I was cooking. For you." Henry slammed his hand on the table. "Seriously? He's 7, Sophia. Are you really starting a fight with a kid?" No one defended her. No one. Then Caleb burst into tears, loud and dramatic, and ran straight into Veronica's arms. She scooped him up instantly. "It's okay, sweetheart. Don't cry," she said, stroking his hair like he was her own grandchild. "Grandma Veronica's right here." Grandma Veronica. Sophia's breath caught. Vivian, her daughter, laughed nervously and said, "Maybe you should take a break, Mom. You're a little intense lately." And just like that, the truth was undeniable. They had replaced her. In their minds, in their hearts, in their family. She was already gone. The new version was prettier, calmer, more convenient. Veronica fit the part like a well-tailored dress. Sophia sat motionless, heart pounding beneath the soda-soaked fabric. But something inside her didn't break this time. It woke up. The dinner table felt miles away. Sophia sat frozen at one end, while the people she had once called family chatted and passed dishes as if nothing had happened. She didn't know what stung more, Henry's hand resting possessively on Veronica's thigh, or Vivian's cheerful chime. "Let's not upset Caleb anymore, okay?" Like Sophia was the problem. Then Caleb, with his tear-streaked cheeks, looked up and declared loud enough for the room to hear, "I don't want Grandma anymore. I want Grandma Veronica. She's nicer." The air left Sophia's lungs, and yet, there it was, a flicker on Veronica's face, barely a twitch of a smile. But Sophia saw it. That wasn't compassion. That was conquest. She could have cried. She could have screamed. Instead, she stood, calmly. The clatter of a plate falling from her sleeve startled the room. Shards scattered across the hardwood floor like the pieces of a life she'd worked decades to hold together. The room went silent. Finally, everyone was watching her. Her voice came low but clear. "Why is it always me?" she asked. "I cook, I clean, I host your holidays, and you still look at me like I'm a burden." Henry scowled. "Not now, Sophia." She didn't blink. "Number now, I haven't eaten a bite all day, and yet I'm called greedy. Caleb lied to your faces and you laughed. I get soda thrown on me, and I'm told not to make a scene." Vivian's eyes darted nervously. "Mom, please. It's Caleb's birthday." Sophia cut her off. "Do you know what today really is? The day I finally realized none of you ever saw me." Veronica opened her mouth, but Sophia turned to her before she could speak. "Your husband died 2 months ago, and here you are sitting at my table, calling yourself grandma. That's not grace. That's gall." Henry stood, his voice sharp. "Sophia, that's enough." She met his gaze with steady calm. "No, Henry, it's not enough. Not yet." And then finally she let it out. "I want a divorce." The words hit the room like a thunderclap. Henry laughed, a cruel, dismissive sound. "You're 67, Sophia. What, you think you're going to start over now?" Sophia looked around, at her daughter who never stood up for her, at her grandson too young to know what he'd done, but old enough to be taught it was okay, at the woman who took her place with the ease of a practice role, and finally at the man who had never seen her as more than a convenience. She took a breath. "You're right," she said. "I am 67, and for the first time in my life, I'm going to live like it means something." The silence was heavier than any scream. And in that silence, Sophia realized she didn't need anyone at that table to agree with her. She just needed to walk away. Sophia didn't pack a suitcase. She didn't take the roast, the pie, or even the lottery ticket tucked in her apron pocket. She walked out the front door with nothing but her purse, her wallet, and the quiet resolve that had finally found its voice. Outside, the wind nipped at her cheeks, sharp and cold, but it felt like the first real breath of air she'd taken in decades. She opened her phone, summoned a ride, and slid into the back of the Uber without looking back. Inside the car, the silence was soft, not strained, peaceful. She watched the lights of Asheville blur past the windows, bookstores, coffee shops, places she'd passed by for years but never stepped into. She thought of how many winters she'd spent locked in kitchens while everyone else laughed. Of all the summers she'd spent boiling over stoves while others dipped their feet in pools. For what? To be replaced by Veronica in under a week? Her voice didn't tremble when she gave the driver directions to the hospital. The hot chocolate burn across her chest still seared beneath her shirt. The doctor, a woman barely in her 30s, examined the wound and gave a tight frown. "This is serious. Do you want us to call someone?" Sophia smiled faintly. "No need. I live alone now." For the first time, the words didn't ache. They felt clean, like a fresh page. After treatment, she checked into a small historic inn downtown, just for the night. The bed was soft. The pillows were piled high. She sank into the covers, clutching a warm tea the receptionist had given her, and opened her phone. She searched starting over at 67. Article after article flooded the screen. Divorced at 70 and thriving. How I found joy after they left me behind. It's never too late. She read everyone, slowly, carefully. Then she made a vow. She would not disappear quietly. The next day, she used her winnings from the scratch-off every penny to put a deposit on a one-bedroom apartment just outside the city. It was small but bright, with ivy crawling up the balcony railings and an old oak tree that cast dappled shadows on the windows at noon. She bought her own linens, her own cookware, even her own YouTube account. There she found women like her, silver-haired, fierce, starting over. One filmed herself hiking through the Grand Canyon. Another baked her way across all 50 states. Sophia subscribed to every one of them. She adopted a gray cat from a shelter, named him Charlie. He followed her from room to room, independent but loyal. And one night, as she sat under a wool blanket watching the sunset dye the sky orange and pink, she whispered out loud, This is mine." It wasn't flashy, it wasn't viral, but it was hers. And that, after all this time, was more than enough to begin again. The days that followed were unlike anything Sophia had experienced in decades. There was no yelling down the hallway, no burnt dinners, no guilt-tripped to-do lists waiting on the counter. The apartment was quiet, yes, but not empty. It was hers. Every dish on the drying rack, every sweater draped over a chair, every framed photo on the shelf, it all bore her imprint. In that silence, Sophia bloomed. She began with small things: a walk to the lake every morning, buying raspberries without guilt, taking the scenic route home just because the sun hit the trees right. Then she started writing. Nothing fancy, just short posts online about what it meant to be 67 and finally free. She wrote about grocery store arguments, burns that went ignored, and dinners where she never sat down. Her voice was honest, calm, and real. And somehow, that honesty struck a chord. The posts gained traction. Women commented from all over the country. "You're telling my story. I thought I was the only one. You made me feel seen." And then came the moment that changed everything. A message from a small podcast host in Oregon who had stumbled across Sophia's blog. "Would you be willing to tell your story on air?" Sophia hesitated at first. She wasn't a speaker. She wasn't flashy. But she remembered how easily Veronica had stepped into her role, how fast the world applauded a second-chance romance without ever asking what happened to the first wife. This was her chance to speak, not to fight, not to defend, but to exist. So she agreed. The podcast was raw, quiet, and heartfelt. Sophia spoke about giving up her youth to raise a daughter who now called someone else Mom, about standing in a kitchen with burns across her chest while her husband carved ribs for another woman, about the exact moment she realized she was no longer invisible. She was just no longer willing to be ignored. The episode went viral within days, not because it was loud, but because it was true. She was invited onto daytime talk shows, asked to write guest columns, even offered sponsorships for women's wellness brands. One interviewer asked her, "What do you want people to learn from your story?" Sophia smiled, serene. That it's never too late to start over, and that you don't need applause to walk away from what no longer serves you. And with every new day, she proved it. She hosted brunches for other women starting over. She volunteered at shelters. She gave talks at local libraries. People didn't call her Henry's ex-wife anymore. They called her Sophia, just Sophia, not someone's mother, not someone's wife, just a woman with silver hair, steady hands, and a voice she had finally chosen to use. The day her divorce became official, Sophia bought herself flowers, not roses or lilies. Something wilder: sunflowers, eucalyptus, Queen Anne's lace, She arranged them in a wide ceramic vase in the center of her tiny dining table. The blooms tilted toward the light pouring through her kitchen window, just like her, reaching without apology. That morning, she slipped on her ash-brown coat, a soft silk scarf wrapped neatly around her neck, and walked to the mailbox. Inside was a plain white envelope. She opened it slowly, carefully. Her divorce decree. Just 2 words stamped in bold at the bottom. Finalized. Irreversible. She didn't cry. Instead, she folded the paper in thirds, placed it into a folder marked New Life, and returned to the kitchen to pour herself a glass of elderberry tea. The world outside hadn't changed. The mail truck still passed at 11:06. The neighbor's dog still barked at Wynn. But inside Sophia's heart, everything had shifted. Later that week, she boarded her first flight. She flew to Montana, then Alaska. She stood under the aurora borealis, its ribbons of color bathing her in silent beauty. She whispered, "You waited for me," and the sky whispered back. She met women at hostels, artists painting desert horizons, poets scribbling on napkins in roadside diners. None of them asked what she used to be, only who she was now. In New Mexico, she learned to sketch. In Florida, she learned to float again, this time in water, not obligation. She documented her journey online, not to impress anyone, but to remember it was real. Every photo she posted was captioned with 2 words, "Still growing." One day, she woke up to find a message in her inbox. A woman in her 70s wrote, "I left my husband after 44 years. I saw your story and thought, maybe it's not too late for me either." Sophia replied, "It never is. The late bloomers have the longest roots." She no longer looked for closure. She no longer scrolled through Vivian's polished posts or Robert's faded Facebook memories. They were part of her story, yes, but not her definition. They were the prologue. She was the novel. In the spring, she bought a lakeside cottage. She grew lavender in the backyard. She baked cinnamon scones and shared them with the neighbors' grandkids. And every Sunday morning, she sat on her balcony with Charlie curled by her feet, writing chapters of the life she never thought she'd live. And when people asked her what she'd say to her younger self, she smiled gently and said, "He never saw you, but I do. You were never too much. You were simply too bright for a dim room." Then she'd pause, sip her tea, and return to her garden, rooted, radiant, and finally completely free. Sophia's story isn't just about heartbreak, it's about resurrection. For decades, she played the part she thought she had to, the doting wife, the tireless mother, the silent servant. She gave and gave and gave until there was nothing left. And when the people she loved most replaced her without hesitation, she realized something that changed everything. If you don't choose yourself, no one else will. Her journey teaches us that self-worth isn't something to be handed to you. It's something you reclaim moment by moment. It's found in the decision to leave the dinner table, to walk out the door, to say no more, and mean it. You don't owe anyone your silence, your comfort, or your years. And even if the world applauds someone else while you disappear, it's never too late to rewrite the script and make yourself the main character again. Because the truth is, you were never too old. You were just waiting for the right time to finally be free. Maybe you're not 67. Maybe you haven't been burned, physically or emotionally. But if you've ever sat in silence, watching others take from you while giving nothing back, then you understand Sophia. Now is your moment. Book that solo trip. Sign up for that class. Move into the smaller apartment with the bigger windows. Cut off the toxic people who only call when they need something. Start a YouTube channel, a garden, a journal, anything that puts your name back at the top of your own life. Because healing doesn't come with fanfare. It comes with choosing yourself every single day. And whether you're 27 or 77, your story isn't over. Start your second act today, and this time, make it yours. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, please like and share with your friends. Your support keeps these stories alive. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a new episode. And if today's story touched your heart, leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you. Take care, stay well, and see you in the next story.